Alright guys, welcome back. In this session, we'll be going through error handling in Visual Basic application. Okay, so as I've mentioned earlier, the purpose of error handling in Visual Basic application is to anticipate, detect, and manage errors that occur during the execution of your code during runtime. Error handling is important. Why? Because number one, it helps to improve user experience. By being able to handle error properly, you're able to prevent abrupt crashes. Okay, the crash that, when you have this debugging error pop up, you're able to prevent these kind of crashes by anticipating errors that may arise and to return the appropriate message return. Okay, basically, we anticipate that, there's going to be some errors that may result from the users, maybe due to incorrectly opening the workbook. So I can anticipate the error and provide an appropriate feedback. Okay, so that's the first reason why we will use error handling. So the second reason is to ensure that the code runs as usual. So rather than having the pop-up appear and having the code ending abruptly, the code can continue executing, right? The code could continue executing gracefully, right? And basically provide the appropriate feedback, right? So that's the two reasons why we would want to use error handling, right? It helps to make your application more robust, user-friendly, okay? And that's about it on the reasons why we should use error handling. Let's go into the specifics of the different types of error handling. So I have a module set up on a fresh workbook, right, that has nothing in it, okay? So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through some of the very common error handling in Visual Basic application. The first type of error handling is the on error. Okay, so this is not something new for anyone who has done VBA programming, right? This is a very, very popular error handling. On error, go to leave, right? So I have a sub error handle. Okay, this is the first type, on error, go to leave, right? We're going to do. What I'm going to say is on error, go to leave. Okay, so it's a very simple. I could use leave or whatever it is, right? On error, go to whatever word that I find appropriate. I just generally use leave, right? So in my book as just workbook. Okay, I'm gonna purposely set some line of code here that is going to result in an error. Okay, so the reason I want it to be registering an error, so some random workbook.xlsm, right? So this is the only instance why I would purposely write an inaccurate code, because I want it to bring us to this line, right? So it's going to see that there's an error, and then it's going to bring us to this line, right? It's going to bring us to this line, right? Leave message box, please open the workbook. Okay, so now you have an error and handling whereby you could account for a workbook being inaccurately opened, right? And instead of it crashing, it's going to give us a message box alert that says, please open the workbook, or please open the right workbook, right? Please open the right workbook. Or you could just say some other message that, you'll find it to be more clear. Maybe please open a workbook that exists, right? So I'm going to run this, and you can see that instead of crashing, right, there's an error. It's brought me to the leave command, right? The leave command, and then I'm getting the message box, right, pop up that please open the right workbook. Okay, so now the disadvantage of using this kind of error handling is that regardless of whether there is an error or not, right? Okay, this command is always going to run. This line is always going to run whether there is an error or not. Okay, so how do we get around this? Right? So we're going to use the exit sub, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you here, right? On error, go to leave, but exit sub. Okay, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to copy this, right? I'm going to copy this, and then I'm just going to rename the procedure, right? I'm going to say version 2. And what I'm going to say is on error go to leaf, some workbook that doesn't exist, right? And then if the user runs into this line of where there is an error, right, then it's going to bring us to the leaf, right? And as what I said, even if there is no error, it's still going to run this line of command. So that's why, in case there is no error, we could just use the exit sub, right? So what the exit sub does is basically it doesn't run the leave command if there is no error. Okay, so unlike in the first case, right? So the work has been run, the code has been running fine. Okay, there is no error whatsoever, but it's still gonna run through this line, and we don't want that, right? We don't want basically a message box that is not relevant to the user, right? We only want this message box to appear if there is an error in this line of code that we have written, right? So that's why we anticipate an error that might happen here. If it doesn't happen, then we just exit the sub before it goes to the leaf, right? So that's the difference there. Okay, I hope you guys are getting a hang of this. Okay, right? So I encourage you to try it on your own with an alert that actually does with a line of code that actually works. Okay, so with the line of code that what I mean by actually works is the line of code that doesn't result in an error, right? And you would see that it would exit the sub. Okay, so I encourage you to try it on your own, okay, to dispel any doubts that you may have, right? So now the third case is on error, resume next, and go to 0, right? So this is another famous type of error handling, okay? A very famous type of error handling. What this does is resume, which means, okay, never mind, let's just get on to it first. Resume, then normal. I'm just going to say it's a form of error handling that allows us to suppress error, okay? It allows us to suppress the error that we anticipate, but then allows us to reset back the error suppression, okay? What I mean by that is that, okay, I know that there's going to be some error written before you anticipate an error, okay? I know that there might be some error in the line of code here, right? So I'm just gonna put some worksheet function, maybe a VLOOKUP, right? I'm gonna use a VLOOKUP for a table that doesn't exist at all, right? So obviously it's gonna result in an error, right? So I'm just gonna say apple sheet 1 dot range, some random range, okay, B5 to B13 dot value, and then it's going to return us the second thing command, and then we want an exact match. So clearly this is a VLOOKUP on a table that does not exist, so it's going to result in an error. But because I'm going to use this command right here, on error resume next. So what's doing is it's going to suppress the error. Okay, it's going to suppress the error from this point onwards. So I anticipate that's an error going to be in this line of code. So I want to suppress this error. But now I've decided, well, but if there is an error down the line, I don't want it to keep on suppressing errors. I want it to be able to stop suppressing the errors, right? And return its functionality back to its usual, to being able to alert on errors, right? So we want to stop suppressing errors and reset it back. And that's when we use on error go to 0. Okay, so all errors occurring will not be suppressed from this point onwards. Okay, so the reason I'm having all these comments is because I'm sharing this workbook, so that's why I want to make sure that you have all the descriptions covered. And the exact same thing, I'm just gonna copy this and paste it. So this is going to result in an error, right? And then I'm just going to end the sub. Now let's run the code. Okay, F8. Okay, on error, resume next. Okay, we know there's going to be an error here, but lo and behold, nothing happens. All right, doesn't give us that debug icon there, right? The debug pop-up, because we have suppressed the error here, right? We have on error, resume next. Basically, we have suppressed the error, but now from this point onwards, we do not want to suppress the error. And you see, look at that. We get the runtime error. Okay, so that's all for on error, resume next, right? And then going back to 0. Okay, the fourth type of error handling is the on error, go to error handle. Okay, so this type of error it's used to pinpoint an error that you know will occur. So a specific error that you know will occur, right? So you need to know the error code. So basically, if I get to this website, bettersolutions.com VBA error handling, right? I'm going to see the list of error numbers. Okay, I'm going to see the list of error numbers. Okay, so this is when we're going to use the on error go to error handle. Basically, when we anticipate that there is going to be a certain error code that is going to happen, we could account for that error code. Okay, so what I mean by that is that sub error handle. Okay, what I'm going to say is, right, once again, written before you anticipate the error. Okay, and then I'm going to say on error go to error handle. Okay, so it's just going to bring us to the error handle. Okay, so you can name it whatever you want, and then some codes that result in error. Okay, so we have some codes that have resulted in error. Okay, all right, some codes that have resulted in error, and then you know what. I'm just going to exit the sub, right? So in case there's no error, we can just exit the sub. But now we know that there is going to be some code that results in error, and then we can get to error handle. Okay, we're doing pretty similar to what we've done previously, but instead of a message box, right, we could actually pinpoint the error number. So I can say that, well, I anticipate that the user is going to commit error dot number. Say, let's go and have a look at the error numbers. Okay, so okay, yeah, let's just have 53. I could say that, well, I anticipate that the user might commit error 53. Then if it commits error number 53, then I can say that message box, what was the error number 53? File not found. So I could just say message box, file not found, open valid file, right? Now I've anticipated this error, but now if this error is not the result, as to why it has brought us to the error handle, right? So in case there's an error, this is going to run, right? So regardless of any error, but if the error number is 53, then it's going to give us the reason for the error. But we also have to say that, well, in case that's not the error number, then we could just say message box, you have some unexpected errors. Okay, so maybe it's one of those error numbers that is not 53, right? There's a long list of error codes here, right? So maybe the user had committed some error number that is not error 53. So the code runs and then results in an error. It brings us to error handle, and then if it's 53, it gives us this return. Otherwise, it gives us message box, you have some unexpected errors. And because I have an exit sub, the beauty of it is that if there's no error, it's just going to exit the sub. Okay? And then the last case of error handling, right, is the on error go to. So this is one of the least used error handling, but it's very useful, right? The reason I say it's useful is because it helps us to navigate through our codes more efficiently. Okay, so what I'm saying is that dim a as long, right? And I'm going to say on error go to label new value, right? I'm just going to use the word new value, right? And then I'm going to say, I'm just going to dim my A. So I've anticipated where, so this is written before where you anticipate an error. Okay, so now I'm going to say A equals to some value that I know is going to give an error. I'm going to divide it by 0. Okay, I'm just going to say A, I'll just have it divided by 0. So A 5 divided by 0 is of course a math error, right? So because the variable is no longer long. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the label. So instead of VBA giving us the error pop-up, debugging error pop-up, I am basically, if this error happens here, somewhere down the line here, it's going to go to the label new value. And then I can just change the value to something like 8, right? So I know there's an error here. And then if I know there's an error, instead of giving us the pop-up of the debugging, right, instead of crashing the line, the code, it's going to see, okay, well, there's an error here, but the user, the code, the programmer have basically said that there's an error, go to label new value. So we anticipate there's some error here, and then we can change this value, right, to something that is legitimate, right? And then we can message box A. Okay, but there is a drawback to this method, right? Okay, so first of all, I would like to explain to you that this kind of error handling is not used for users. Okay, it's not used for the average users. It's used for programmers. Okay, suppose you're retrieving some values from a code, from whatever it is. Okay, from a runtime variable. Okay, and then you know that, well, there might be an error, so you can use this value. And if there is an error, you can account for a new value, and then you can just continue running the code. Okay, and as I've said, the second drawback is that, well, regardless of whether there is an error or not. So this thing is an error, right? So if I run the code, ambiguous name detected, error handle. Wait, I'll get to you in a second. All right, the reason there's an ambiguous method detected is because we have two procedure with the same name, right? I have error handle procedure on the first one, and then I have error. So I'm just going to rename this to something different. Okay, so it's a good thing that we got this pop-up alert, so we know that we should not have two conflicting procedure name, right, in a module. Okay, so now let's run the code. Right, A is now an error. It's an error. Okay, 5 divided by 0 doesn't exist. Now it's bringing us to A equals to 8, and then message box A equals to 8. And now what if there is no error? What if there is no error? I just have 6. Now 6 is not an error. 6 is not an error. Okay, so if I run this, it's still giving us 8. You could see that it's taking on the value of the label in the new value, right? So if you want to try to exit the sub, right? If you want to exit the sub, we could try that, right? And this is one way to get around it, right? So if you anticipate there is an error, and then you could just have this thing, right? 6 divided by 0, and then you could have a new label, right? Message box A. And if you don't anticipate, right? If you would like to ensure the code runs as usual in the event where you don't anticipate, and in the event that error does not occur, then you can always exit the sub. Okay, so that's why I said there's a drawback, but there's a get around to it. Okay, we can always exit the sub. Okay, so that's about it, guys, for error handling. Hope you guys have learned something. In the next section, we will be going through worksheet and workbook events. Okay, another very interesting topic. I'll see you then.